should I actually go for a Abu Dhabi license? Am I allowed to have it? So this is my own personal question. But you're a resident of Abu Dhabi, and then if you can tell us something more how to get the license, and can you share maybe by any chance any of your thoughts about the support? Because for me personally, if there is any organization above giving the license, there should be some support, or at least you could actually know where to and from where to learn things that you should follow. So if you can share with us this, that would be great.
Yeah, I'm very happy to advise anybody who's going to spear dive in Abu Dhabi. It's very, very simple. You need to go onto the Environment Agency website, and there's a link there for a fishing license. You need a copy of your Emirates ID and a photograph. You do it all online, and then you'll get your license issued. I don't think physically they issue the licenses. This is mine from before. This is my original Abu Dhabi Environment Agency fishing license. And basically I carry that with me all the time when I'm diving. I have that, I have my Paddy Dive Master from going back to 2002, been around. And of course my ADA 2 license that I got with Yuri, and my instructor back then was Tony. So Sulankivi, who's a Finnish guy who taught me basically my ADA 2 instruction, and I carry them with me all the time. So if you want to get one, if you want to come to Abu Dhabi to dive, if you want to get one, it makes sense to just go online onto the Abu Dhabi Environment Agency website. It's very simple. You go online, you do it. I think it's 120 dirhams now, and that covers you for 12 months to do whatever you want to. Once you've done it online, you have to go to there are kiosks here. There's one in one of the buildings here in Reem Island. You just literally put your Emirates ID in, you then basically register as a diver, and they issue the license. And you've got it basically. Nobody's ever asked me for this, incidentally. Nobody's ever asked me for this. But I always carry it with me just in case. You know, if somebody comes and says, you're not supposed to be spear diving here, so, well, and usually it comes from anglers, and they say, well, I've got my license, where's yours? You know, this is my license, and says that I can do what I'm doing. And I just think I feel with it. Why would I not feel comfortable? I take it when I go to Dubai diving, you know, and again, I've never been asked to show it, but I've got it with me all the time. It just makes sense. And it legitimizes it, in my opinion. I might be wrong, but in my opinion, it legitimizes it. We've been stopped many times on boat trips by the Coast Guard, who check our Emirates ID. Again, they've never asked for this. I gave it once, and the Coast Guard was, what's this? So, I think education comes on both sides. I think there should be, in my opinion, some form of license. You should have some form of basic skills. Now you can just walk in and buy a huge gun like this, which is a very dangerous piece. I mean, if you were to take the shooting line off this and load it and fire it, it would go over 100 meters. And that's some serious power and dangerous power. It's only the resistance underwater that makes it only 5 to 6 or 7, 8 meters maximum kill range. But it's a dangerous piece of equipment that people don't seem to understand. And when you've got that thing in your hand, that's a weapon. That's a lethal weapon that you could kill somebody with quite easily by mistake, you know. And if you're not careful and don't understand, and nobody tells you how to look after your equipment and your lethal equipment, and it can be quite dangerous. I think basic diving skills, basic weapon handling skills, basic environmental skills. What should you be shooting? What shouldn't you be shooting? You know, if we all understand, then there's no excuse. You can't do it wrong. But if nobody tells you, if you can just walk in a shop now, buy a gun and jump in the sea and fire it, you know, why is there no control over that type of... I mean, you couldn't go and buy a weapon. You couldn't buy a 2.2 or a shotgun here. but you can buy one of these, which is just as lethal. Okay, so I think the government, I know they're talking about it, and I know our good friend Firaz, he's involved in the discussions about licensing spear diving, and I think the problem is you can't just do it for some. Everybody's got to do it, right? So, and it's difficult because historically Abu Dhabi has been a place for some fantastic spear diving, and there are some fantastic spear divers here who are locals, and like they say, you know, this is my country, why should I be licensed to do something that's in my history for many years? So there's that point to it, I think. But I think as an expat, we need to make sure we've got the license to ensure if somebody stops us, we've got what we need. That's my opinion. I'm not saying everybody should do it. I just feel comfortable having a license to say that I know what I'm doing and that I can do what I'm doing. I think there is support from the Environment Agency here, and they do list on their website minimum sizes for us to be able to shoot fish here, and it's an ongoing thing. You know, we need to understand what we should be doing with the environment in particular. You know, when I first started diving here nearly 20 years ago, I used to dive in Snoopy Rock, and it was covered in the most beautiful corals and the most beautiful fish everywhere. I went there and snorkeled a couple of years ago before the lockdown, and it was desolate. There was nothing. There was no corals there anymore. I think I saw one fish in a 30-minute snorkeling trip around Snoopy Island, which made me very sad to see the decimation of the corals here. It's good to see nowadays, though, that there are new corals growing. The blue corals are starting to grow now. The soft corals are coming back, and I think with the I mean, this island wasn't here when I moved here. There was nothing here. It was just sea. Now there are thousands of people living here, and the debris that construction can't help, of course, but you know, I'm personally, and I told you earlier today, please bring something out with you. Every time I dive here, I bring some trash out. And, you know, now if you start diving here, those of you who know this area, know that it was just desolate and covered in trash. Now, it took me 10 minutes to find some trash to take out, which made me feel quite proud, actually, because me and people who dive with me, I always encourage them to bring something out. It's not difficult to pick up a bit of metal and throw it out alongside and then let it go into the skip. There's a lovely lady who walks up and down here, an American lady who comes with a backpack, and she picks up as much trash as she can. And every time I see her, I applaud her, you know, just wow. It's wonderful to see somebody from another country caring about the environment. And she picks up so many bits of trash here among the rocks here, and it's good to see that. It's people understand that we have to look after our environment, because if we don't, who's going to do it?
All of us, we like to travel. Some of us were more or less privileged people. They travel for different reasons and purposes. So you mentioned something that you traveled to Vietnam and Indonesia, Bali and Australia. If you can tell us something more about your spearfishing or freediving experiences, that would be great.
Okay, sure. I mean, as I said earlier, I did a lot of scuba diving before. I used to do scuba photography, underwater photography, which I really enjoyed. One of my things, as most of the guys on the group know, is that I love sharks. I love sharks. If somebody says, what's your favourite animal? It's a shark. And my favourite experience with an animal was when I dived in Australia, in Sunshine Coast. And I dived on Brisbane, HMSS Brisbane. And when I was down on that wreck with a Japanese-Australian dive guide, a bull shark. I experienced a bull shark, and we were in the wheelhouse of the wreck, and it was intentionally sunk by the Australian government. and it was sunk down to about, I think, about 10 meters depth to promote coral growth. And we both went down, and I always look for sharks when I'm scuba diving. I love sharks because there's something about them that makes me relax, which I suppose is a bit weird, really. Most people would panic. Personally, I relax when I'm with sharks. And we dived on this wreck, and we're down at 10 meters, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, came a huge bull shark, and it started to circle us. All the telltale things that you worry about. The pecks were down. He was looking at us. He was checking us out, and I felt okay. You know, I felt quite comfortable. But my dive guide was a Japanese Australian guy, and he was scared stiff. This guy, and he was, what? And he had a slate, and he said, let's go. And I said, we don't want to go anywhere. We've got to stay where we are. He's like, why? Shark. I said, yeah, but sharks only attack when you're above them. Sharks can't attack you when you're below them. Okay? So if we go up and his pecks are down, he's circling us, he's going to attack. So we've got to stay here as long as we can until he goes. And I'm writing this on the slate. And I could tell he was panicking. And I could almost see his gauges going down straight away. And I'm like, okay, just relax now. You just need to relax. Take it easy. He's not going to come in and attack us whilst we're in the wheelhouse. Just relax and just take it easy. So just try and preserve your air and just take it easy. So we hung around, and he sort of spent 20 minutes going around and checking us out. And I was watching his gauges, and I could see he was getting down. He was starting to lose too much. You know, you need 50 bar at least. And he was getting pretty close to that 50 bar after maybe a 30-minute dive. So I checked my gauges. I still had at least 2/3 in my tank, and I was comfortable. So we got to a stage where the shark was still circling us, and he was getting more and more concerned and worried. So I just wrote on it, you know, look, don't worry, everything's fine. He's not going to attack us whilst we're inside the wheelhouse. You just need to relax and conserve what you've got left. And he's like, oh, look, less than 50 bar. So I said, okay. So I said, just stay. And we stayed with him until effectively he ran out of air. And I gave him my octopus. I said, just take it easy. Just try and relax a little bit more. So he had my octopus, and I was just calming him down. And he started to feel easier. And by this time, the shark had sort of given up on us and left us. So he said, whoa. I said, just be careful, just take it easy. And we both came up, and the dive boat was there waiting for it. It was like a big Gemini inflatable waiting for us there. And we got back on the boat, and he said, oh my God, you're insane. I said, no, I'm not insane, I'm the sensible one. You're the one who was putting yourself at risk. When you panic like that amongst sharks, amongst predators, they can feel it. I don't know if you know, when you're diving as a spear diver, and I think Robert touched on this, it's all about relaxation. If you relax, then you reduce your heartbeat. Sometimes when we're diving, we can hear our own heartbeat. I don't know if you can. I can certainly hear my heartbeat increasing when I've been down for perhaps a little bit too long. Fish know this. Fish understand that. And if you imagine that a little fish down there maybe has 1,000 other fish every day checking him out for the next meal, it's the same when we're diving. When we're diving, if we relax and things calm down and slow down, they don't feel worried. If your heartbeat's pumping like crazy, they know that. They can feel that. And so they leave. If we learn to relax a little bit more, like with the sharks, for example. One of my good friends, Liam, him and I were diving not long ago. And Liam put his arm into a rock, into a cliff edge, and the little baby shark that was, not baby, it was probably about this big, I think a silky shark, and he put his arm in its mouth, and he pulled it out, and the shark was clamped onto his arm. I helped him, and we managed to get the shark off, and we came up, and he said, oh my God, what was that? I said, mate, that's a war wound. how many people have been bitten by a shark? That's wonderful, lucky you. And he's like, I won't put it that way, certainly, but you know, a lot of people are afraid of sharks. I don't think you should be afraid of sharks, because they're more afraid of us than we are of them. I've seen a shark here, within 50 meters from where we are now. A shark this big, in a little crevice, put my torch in and saw him, looked at me, waved to him, and left. People who panic, that's the worst thing you can do when you're with sharks. If you panic, they think that you're distressed. And what do sharks look for? Distressed fish, because it's easier for them to get a meal. With the bigger sharks, like the bull and the tiger sharks, they're opportunist strikers. Whereas a reef shark, he gets a meal most days anyway at night time, and he's not desperate for a meal. If you see something like a great white, I would love to see a great white. I've never seen one. A great white might only eat once every 6 months. He's an opportunist feeder. So yeah, he'll come and have a go. You know, if you look at the figures, you know, we kill 100 million sharks a year. 100 million sharks a year we're slaughtering, and mostly for their fins, right, in the Chinese trade and Hong Kong and those areas. And how many people die from sharks? 2, 3 maybe. A lot of people get bitten. The shark comes in, takes a bite. Don't like that. They don't like neoprene for a start. They take a bite and then they go. And a lot of people do suffer shark bites, and it's usually through mistaken identity. Surfers, for example, surfers have white surfboards and their arms and legs out. If a shark looks at that, he might see what he thinks is a seal, because seals have lighter bottoms, and he might come in, take a quick bite and disappear. But it's very rare they'll actually come back. So how many times have I seen sharks? I think I've done about 550 scuba dives in my life, and I would say at least 400 of those in Southeast Asia with sharks. And I look for them. I literally look for sharks if I'm scuba diving. Not so much as a free diver, a spear diver, because you haven't got the time. But certainly as a scuba diver, you'll get to see a lot more in Southeast Asia than you do here. But I would say, if you see one here, don't be frightened. Just enjoy it. Enjoy the experience and let him go on his way. Because we're in their land, we're in their world, right? Who do we think we are to go into somebody's world and make a problem? What if you do if a 10-foot whale, 10-foot great white shark came into your dining room? What would you do? Of course, you'd fight back, right? So I think just respect the fact that we're guests in their environment. It's not the other way around. If you learn that, you learn to not panic when you see a shark. You learn to enjoy seeing sharks, because they're apex predators. The same as a hamur is an apex predator on the reef. They're apex predators, and we're in their world. We should respect that. Should we kill sharks? Never. I would never, ever, ever condone killing an apex predator, because it starts from the top. The problems start from the top and work their way down. Sharks clean the reefs. Sharks help to keep our reefs clean.
We are having a great display here. You have a lot of equipment. If you can lead us and tell us more about your equipment, which one do you like, what's actually so important in your equipment, what you're looking forward actually to, and what are the specifications that you like to choose when you buy the equipment?
It's vitally important, and I think they just make so much sense. They're not expensive, it's cheap to buy. Most of all the dive shops will have them, and I use my dive float for more than just a float. I use my dive float as safety, because the boats can see me, they know that there's a diver down. I use my dive float as a place to hold my knife. I use it for my float line, and I think one of the most important things on here is my whistle. And if you have a whistle, it means that the captain on the boat knows where you are all the time. He can see your float, because it's usually bright orange. He knows that that's where his divers are, because currents can sometimes take us a long way away. Having a whistle, I think, is very, very important, because they can hear you if there's sometimes they can't see you. Sometimes if there's some swell, then they're not going to be able to see you, and particularly if you haven't got one of these. If you don't have a float, he doesn't know where the hell you are. And some people have hoods, so how's he going to see you if you haven't got a float? A whistle, I think, is important, because not just from visually but audible. If you've got a problem, blowing that whistle, they know there's a problem. And people say, oh, you can't use them in the sea. Of course you can, because these whistles these days don't have P's anymore. It's just a simple aluminium whistle, as I gave you one today. I bought 25, and I'll give them to everybody I dive with, because I think it's important. Just put it on your float line, everybody's safe. You know, I think using a float is a very important thing. Different type of gear. What type of guns do I use? For example, I've got small guns, I've got medium guns. The small guns I'll use for the small guns I use for reef diving, but it's still, even though it's a small gun, it's still attached to my float. I've got big guns, as you can see. I've got the big the 100 euro Rife, which I love this gun. It's an amazing gun, beautiful gun, and is what I use for deeper diving and going for the bigger fish. I just think there's something about a wooden gun that's different. A wooden gun, to me, first of all, it takes most of the reef coil away from your shot, so you can aim true, whereas with the aluminium guns I tend to aim low because of the recoil. With this, I've got two 14mm bands, and the last one is the 16mm band. This one, sorry. Personally, I can't even load that. Without a load assist, I can't load it. Some of the other guys can, like Wayne, who's one of the best divers I've dived with. Wayne, who is South African, he can load this quite easily. I can't. I'm not strong enough to be able to load it. I have a load assist that I use to load it sometimes. It's not an easy thing to do, loading a 16mm band. Some guys only use 16mm bands. I suppose it's what you get used to. Personally, I think when you're using big guns like this, a lot of the dive shops also sell the load pads that go on, that you put on. A lot of them use load assist, which is another small bungee that connects and gives you a rest. I think it makes sense to use something different when you're using bigger guns. The small guns for the reefs, the big guns for the deeper sides. Different types of fins. I use plastic fins. I also use the fiberglass fins from Leader Fins now. You tried it today. You can feel the difference, right?
I saw it.
When I first went from that to this, I actually thought I'd lost them because I couldn't feel them on. But the difference is phenomenal, and I would strongly recommend anybody who's going deeper to consider using fiberglass or carbon fins. They're much more expensive, but they're amazing. They just make such a difference and make life so much easier for us. And that's what we want, right? Keep everything as easy as possible and as simple as possible. Different depths mean different requirements for spear diving. If you're going to go anything deeper than 10 meters, I think personally fiberglass or carbon fins are a must, because it makes things so much easier than, you know, I've only just bought my first fiber fins. I used to use only the plastic and swear by the plastic fins. The Cressy Gara, I think, are great fins, but they're heavy and you don't know the difference until you tried it. You tried mine today. You felt the difference, right? The difference is phenomenal. Guns, I wouldn't normally take this this Rife gun of mine unless I was going to look for bigger fish, like in depths of 15 meters plus. There's no point. And the little 65 centimeter Cressy that I bought from Ez actually a long time ago has served me for the last 4 years, And you know, the kit, the gear. You know, people say, oh, you know, what type of gear do you wear? You know, I use a 3mm now that it's just turning back to when I can get back to my maybe 1mm or back to my skin, to the rash guards only. The weight belt, I think, is important. I don't understand people who choose to use the nylon weight belts. Personally, I think rubber for weight belts makes a lot more sense and is a lot better. I see people sometimes even wearing their weight belts the wrong way around, putting the buckle the other way. The whole point of having it the way that we all have it is so that your buddy can take it off quickly. I'm using a bit more weight on my belt now because lately we've been using full 3mm wetsuits, and I need more weight for the buoyancy compensation. So I'm up to sort of 4 kilos of weight on my belt. But when I'm on using the thinner skin suits or the rash guards, I'll take off and down to 2.5 kilos because that's all I need for that. So there's a difference. And again, it's all about experience. How much weight do I need? And a lot of people overweight. And I was a bad example of, I think it was Liam who said you've got too much weight. And I listened to him and I took some weight off. And I found it a lot easier because when you've got too much weight, you're fighting to stay afloat. When you're snorkeling, if you're fighting to stay afloat, that's a problem. And I took a couple of 1.5 kilos off. I thought, wow, he's right, you know. And I learnt from experience. Liam has been diving for years and understands it. And he dives from his kayak, he dives from shore, he dives from boats. Listen to people who have the experience. Don't think you know everything, because we don't. Listen to people who've got the experience. It's great to have instructors, but it's also great to dive with people who've been diving a long time. The Lebanese guys are a great example. Eli is a good friend of mine who lives out on Nurai Island, and he's an amazing diver. And he has big guns, he has small guns, he has plastic fins, he has different types of fins for different experiences. I always find the Lebs are good. The Lebanese, because it's much harder to dive in Lebanon as a spearfisher than it is here. And the Italy as well, Italians. The Mediterranean spear divers tend to be pretty good at what they do. South Africa as well. South Africa is not an easy place to dive. There's a lot of sharks there. You've got to understand. Aussies as well know what they're doing. And that's, I think, the great thing about spear diving here in the UAE. So many different, I don't know how many nationalities there are on my group. I would think probably, I know Turkish, I know Italian, I know French, I know Polish, of course, I know British divers, I know Moroccan, so many different nationalities. But the great thing is, when you're in there are no nationalities. We're unique because you don't need to talk when you're in the water. People learn sign language without even doing training. We know if we're down and we're okay, we're coming up, how are you? I'm good, you know, I'm great, you know. The international language, shark, we all know that, right? We know that there's a shark, but don't be too worried if you see a shark, because it's a great experience in my opinion. So what's good about freediving for me and spear diving for me? International camaraderie. You will never understand how good a friend is unless you dive with him, in my opinion. I talked about Liam earlier. We went off to an area, we dived in his kayak, we kayaked out to it, and we're like 1.5 kilometers away from land. We didn't realize by the time we finished diving there was only about 6 inches of water, because the tide with the full moon and the tides are affected a lot, and it had gone out 1.5 kilometers away. And I'm old, you know, I'm the oldest diver I know is me at 62, 63 this year. But seeing a guy like Liam, who's like 140 kilo, big guy, 6'3" or something, pick up a kayak on his head can literally walk a kilometre with it. I was shocked how strong that guy is. I'm strong in the water. Out of the water, I'm useless. Liam can pick that thing up on his head and walk all that way. I'm just dragging the floats along. Amazing. The big people in the water are completely different. We all have, I think there are two types of fitness as well. Land fit and sea fit is a completely different thing. You know, I can hold my breath. My longest was in static was 4 minutes 10 seconds. I've seen older guys than me hold their breath for over 5 minutes. I'm like, wow, how does that work? Not in the sea, because it's a different technique and it's a different sport. Freediving, spear diving, and apnea, static apnea, is a completely different sport. You know, I can do static for, I don't know, 60 meters underwater in my swimming pool, but it's and hold my breath for 4 minutes 10 seconds. Doing that here is a completely different issue. You know, you've got all sorts of different things going on in your mind, and even thinking uses oxygen. It sounds weird, but thinking, if you eat before you dive, digestion actually uses oxygen. Digesting food uses oxygen. So all these different things make a difference to your breath hold skills. And I'm probably on average, I don't know, 45 seconds to a minute and a half, a minute 45 when I'm diving. And I find it comfortable and easy. Some people can't hold their breath for more than 20 seconds and go any deeper than 5 meters, but it doesn't matter because there's something there for everybody. And once you've been a buddy with somebody diving together, you start to understand the camaraderie of spearfishing, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm so lucky actually that I'm around people recently that I have a pleasure to make an interview with. Definitely for me, guys, that's a process that I learn. You know, I'm not a newbie, but definitely 2 years, including a year of COVID, didn't help me actually much with improving my skills. That's why I'm coming back right now. If you can tell us something more, Will, about how would you actually compare Abu Dhabi to Dubai to Fujairah? I believe you actually dove in all of these places. You probably spearfish in these places, so that would be great to know. I'm just curious.
I've dived all around the UAE since I've been here, and spearfishing in particular. Our good friend Ez, was the first person to teach me how to be a spearfisher. I dived a lot in Dubai, in Fujairah, in Al-Aqsa, those type of places. It's a different type of diving completely. I think this is a hidden gem. Abu Dhabi is a hidden gem because when you dive here in Abu Dhabi, I think it's harder to get fish in Abu Dhabi than it is in Fujairah and those places, because we need to be looking inside the rocks and the corals and searching. We always have a torch with us, always, because we need to be searching. In Fujairah, when you go offshore in Fujairah, and you're lucky to be able to dive where the tankers are and go down the anchor lines and see some of those beautiful kingfish and the mahi-mahi. It's a dream for us guys in Abu Dhabi because we're scrambling around trying to find some sea bream. You know, I've been offshore diving here in Abu Dhabi as well with some of our good friends who own boats here. I've been off to some deeper areas and seen some fantastic fish, some of the barracudas. Only last week, one of our guys on a boat trip with Faraz got a 12-kilo barracuda. It's just incredible to see something like that. You know, it's like, whoa! I was having a bit of trouble with my ear, so I didn't get to dive too much. But it was nice to see the newer guys seeing some of those big fish and pulling some of those big fish in. And it was a joy to see that. But for us, seeing big fish like that is quite unusual. I'm not saying it's easier to dive in Fujairah and Dubai. It's just as difficult. It's a different type of skill. But we appreciate seeing that on the website when Shai's, people like Francisco, for example, he puts some of the videos on there. It's great to see some of those big fish. And Robert the other day was talking about bluefin tunas. Wow! Seeing a tuna in the UAE would just blow my mind. I've seen a big kingfish here before. I didn't shoot, it was too big for my small gun. I've seen some big trevallies here. I've seen some big barracudas here. When we go off on the boats with Firas, we see some great fish out there. I was diving there maybe 3 or 4 months ago and saw at least 300 or 400 eagle rays, which was like, wow, where did they come from? And we were all diving amongst them, and it was great to see them. Problem was there's no other fish. I think all the fish disappear when they come, but seeing hundreds of eagle rays, it just blew my mind. You know, I saw it when I dived scuba back in Southeast Asia, in Indonesia, in Thailand, and Malaysia. But seeing that here was just a shock and a pleasant surprise to see that the ocean is healthy. When you're seeing 300-400 eagle rays diving with you, and you're literally there, and they're coming up, and some of them actually touching your fins with their tails. It's just the most. I was in tears, literally. It hit me that much. I was literally in tears diving. Can you believe that? I'm in tears seeing this, because it shows that the environment is healthy and strong. So it's good to see things like that. And the whale shark, you know, people that I've been unfortunately never seen a whale shark in the wild, and I've done literally thousands of dives and never seen a whale shark, which is very sad, really. But and I'm jealous of you guys over in Fujairah and Dubai who do see these things. We don't see them, unfortunately, but one day hopefully I'll get to see something like that. But yeah, look, the seas have struggled, the oceans have struggled. The plastic is just sad to see the plastic in the ocean now. And when I see documentaries showing fish being full of plastic, and you know, cigarette butts and things like that, people just flick them. I used to smoke. I did it. I admit it. I used to smoke and flick it. Oh, it doesn't cause any damage, but wow, the damage that even a cigarette butt causes to the environment is amazing. And some of the seabirds, they don't know. You know, they pull something out that's white and think it's edible and eat it. The damage that it causes is frightening. You know, just seeing how our just not thinking. We don't think. We just throw a bit of plastic out. It's only a bit of plastic. When a fish eats a bit of plastic, it causes untold damage to that organism, and it filters down. It starts from the big fish, and the big fish eat the smaller fish eat smaller and smaller and smaller, and it filters down from the big down to the small. So the big fish eat the small fish who've got plastic inside them, that gets ingested by the bigger fish and causes damage to their internal organs. And you know, I've seen the turtles with 6-packs, the plastic 6-packs stuck in their mouth, and it kills them. And we're all party to that. There's some great documentaries online. I think one was called Plastic Ocean, which literally, when you watch something like that, it gets me emotionally when I see that happening, because I love the sea and I want to protect the sea. Yeah, I'm a spearfisher and I shoot fish, but I try to ensure that what I shoot is sustainable. I think we, the spearfishers, are the most sustainable fishers out there. And for somebody to shoot it just for the sake of shooting it, I'm really against that. I think if you're going to eat it, shoot it. If you don't like it, leave it alone. Okay. I've been in a situation personally in Al Aqsa when I first started spearfishing, and I was diving there, and we went out and we were okay. Everything was cool, the weather was nice, but all of a sudden the weather started to turn, and the waves started to get bigger. I dived down in the beginning of my career as a spearfisher, and I took a shot. I think it was a parrotfish, actually. And when I shot the parrotfish went into a hole under the water at probably 6 or 7 meters deep. Now, it doesn't sound very deep, but when that fish has gone in there, and fish are not stupid, they're quite smart. So what happened was, I went down, and my buddy was on the surface with me. I went down to get my spear back, and my spear was stuck in the parrotfish, who was a decent sized parrotfish, but he'd gone into a cave. And so I didn't think anything of it. I sort of had a look, saw what was going on, did the sensible thing, came up, got my breath, did my recovery breathing for, I usually say, at least 3 times the depth, the time of your dive, you should be recovery. So if I dive for 30 seconds, I make sure I've got at least a minute and a half. If I dive for a minute, I try to make sure I've got a 3-minute recovery, plus, if possible. So I went down in this dive at Al-Aka, and when I went down, my buddy was there, and I went down, and I had to go into underneath the rocks. It wasn't a cave per se, it was rocks, a crevice in the rocks. And I went in, and I saw the fish there, and I sort of tried to get hold of my spear, and I pulled and pulled and pulled, and my rash guard, as it was then, got stuck on some coral. Okay, so pulling, and then I had to realize I had to forget the spear, and I just as I was pulling out of the crevice, my mask and snorkel came off. Okay, I knew I was in trouble then, so I let my weight belt go, forgot the gun, and came back up to the surface and looked for my buddy, who wasn't there. The waves had gone up to at least a meter, maybe 2 meters high, and we had trouble. I knew I was in trouble then, and my buddy had disappeared. So I still wanted to get my gun, of course, right? I want my gun. So I went back down again, got hold of the spear, and managed to, the fish actually got off the spear, and I came back up to the surface. But by this time, I didn't have a weight belt, I didn't have a mask and snorkel. All I had in my hand was my gun. So I had to swim back to the shore, and it was a good 500-600 meter swim back to the shore. And by the time I got there, I was absolutely finished, and I just beached myself like a whale on the beach. And my buddy came up, and that time he was having a smoke. He said, "You all right, mate?" I said, "Where were you?" He said, "Oh, I'm not as strong a swimmer as you. I decided to come back." Right. Okay. Kept my cool, didn't get upset, explained to him about blackouts and things like that. I remember talking to one buddy and said, "You know about blackouts, right?" He said, "Yeah, I've got a 2000 lumen torch. I'm like, what has that got to do with it? Well, you mean if it goes dark and you need to... No, not quite the same thing. And I explained to him what the blackout situation was. Other times where I've been in a bit of trouble, I think we've already talked about, I was diving in Vietnam, freediving in Vietnam. Went down to 25 meters without fins because I promised my kids I wouldn't dive any deeper than 25 meters. I went down to the plate with an instructor who was on the surface, went down without fins, felt comfortable, down to 25 meters, and I did what I used to always do, which was stupid as a freediver. I spent time to look around. So I looked at the luminous and all the rest of it and a couple of fish, decided to make my way back, and I did 5 strokes to make my way back to the surface, and looked and realized I was still on the plate at 25 meters. I think this is a problem now. Thanks to my AIDA training, I understood I had to swim laterally from where I was, and then made my way back to the surface, and when I hit the surface I blacked out again after a 25-meter free dive. The instructor was an AIDA, qualified instructor of course. She came and recovered me, brought me back, and I remember that not being as nice as the first one, because I was getting, she was pulling me back to the buoy, and I was getting water in my mouth and it wasn't comfortable at all. But by the time we swam back to the dive boat, which we were the only 2 free divers, there's probably 50, 60, 70 Chinese scuba divers learning to scuba dive. And when we got back to the boat, I actually helped her get back on the boat, and I got back on the boat, and the captain said, what happened? I said, oh, just a blackout, everything's fine. He said, is she okay now? I said, no, she didn't have the blackout, it was me. He said, so why is she shaking? Because she'd never had a blackout experience before. And we sort of got on and we sort of chatted about it, and we went for dinner that night and discussed it. And I said to her, actually, if you want a blackout for your students, let me know. I've done it twice. I'm an expert. It's probably not the right thing to do, but it was an interesting experience. And yes, it was dangerous. And yes, I was silly. And this is one thing I always said to freedivers in the past. Don't stop on the plate. Get down, touch the plate, get back up. Because it's too easy. Because I don't know about you guys, but when I was freediving, the calm, because your lungs are compressing, right? You still got the same oxygen, but your lungs are compressing. And you feel better, you feel cool, you feel safe when you get down there, and you're not. You've got to touch that plate and get back up as quickly as possible. So any freedivers out there, don't get to the plate and have a look around. Get down, touch it, and make your way out. Because it's dangerous. And the feeling of comfort when your lungs are compressed with the same oxygen is frightening, because it's only afterwards when you realize that the only reason you feel comfortable is because you had the same oxygen in your compressed lungs. At 25 meters, your lungs are compressed down to probably, I don't know, 30% of their normal size. And when you start to come up again, and your lungs start to exhale again and go back to normal, not exhale, sorry. Your lungs are going back to normal size, decompress, that you come up, and it's only when you start to hit the surface that you realize that and remember, it's not about wanting to breathe after a deep dive, it's wanting to expel the CO2, because the CO2 is a poison. And you'll notice when you come up from a deep dive, the first thing you do is exhale, not inhale. You want to get rid of that poisonous CO2. And it's realizing that made me understand about deep diving and how dangerous it can be. And I was just stupid. Went down, look around, everything's cool. I did it when I did my first blackout. Looked around, 30 meters, everything's great, and came back up again and had the problems. So that's why I go back to that training. I think everybody should have some form of free dive, spear dive training before they start to go any deeper than 4 or 5 meters. And I know that there are quite a few spear dive instructors, free dive instructors within our communities, either on my group or on Spear Dive Abu Dhabi group or on the apnea group, which is some great guys on there, and on the free dive group. There are so many instructors there who are prepared to give you their time to teach you what you need to know to be a safe diver. So don't be safe, don't take risks. Be safe, it's simple, right? Just enjoy it, but don't take too much of a risk. I was new, I thought I was invincible. I did 38 meters, well, what's all the fuss? But it's not really at the deep dives that you have problems. Sometimes you can be diving. This morning we dived at 9 meters, and I got quite tired, and when I hit my head on the overhang, I didn't panic, of course, because I know that dive, and I just pulled out and came up. But you said, "Are you okay, Will?" I mean, yeah, I'm okay, but I didn't take a risk, but I came into a situation that I wasn't really prepared for. It's only my experience that said, calm down, pull back, and make your way up, that made sure that I was okay. And of course my buddy Andrew was there waiting for me to come up and make sure that I was okay. And that's the important thing about diving with somebody else all the time. Always make sure. And I would say, if you're a diver, try to dive with somebody with more experience, because you need that extra experience to make sure that you're safe. So my feeling is, enjoy spear diving, enjoy free diving, but always make sure that you've got a buddy with you, and if preferably somebody who's got more experience than you and is there if you need him.